This video is brought to you by NVIDIA. Their cutting-edge lineup of 50 series GPUs has just been restocked and reloaded, so if you've been thinking about a system upgrade, then now is the perfect time. Enjoy unmatched frame rates and fidelity thanks to DLSS 4 plus multi-frame generation and vidia-reflex, delivering you the ultimate Battlefield 6 experience. Click below or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Video games are made by hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, but there's always someone leading those people. On December 2nd, 2021, EA announced that Vince Zampella would be taking the reins of the Battlefield franchise, and it's hard to think of a person on planet Earth who would be more qualified. Zampella was one of the fathers of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the game that changed it all. After his falling out with Activision, he founded a new studio, Respawn, and with EA as a publisher, they released the seminal Titanfall, a game that rewrote the book on movement-based shooters. Then they released Titanfall 2, a game that maintained the same quality bar in its multiplayer, but also had one of the best, if not the best, single-player campaigns to ever grace a multiplayer shooter. EA acquired Respawn for nearly $500 million back in 2017, and 2 years later, they released Apex Legends, one of the very few games to take a big bite out of the Battle Royale pie, owing to its underlying quality, presentation, and innovation. Innovations that many other BR games would go on to emulate in the following years. And not for nothing, but Respawn also put out 2 fantastic Star Wars games after that. Not an easy thing to do, as many companies have demonstrated over the years. But yeah, Call of Duty, Titanfall, Apex Legends, and now Battlefield. I genuinely struggle to think of anyone working in video games who has had such a transformative impact on a single genre and who has managed to achieve that impact across a widely disparate groups of studios, publishers, subgenres, and franchises. Vince Zampella's CV is genuinely absurd and I think unmatched. Because make no mistake, Battlefield 6 is another trophy in Zampella's already overstuffed cabinet. It's very easy to nitpick around the edges of this thing, and the single player campaign basically sucks, not gonna lie, but the core of the multiplayer experience is just phenomenal, regularly delivering the sort of epic only in Battlefield moments that are the staple of this series. I do not envy the task of EA's Battlefield studios when it comes to making a Battlefield game that is ready to compete in 2025. Battlefield may have plenty of IP cachet, but you're competing with Call of Duty and Battle Royale games and extraction shooters and free-to-play offerings and all the rest. And yet, despite how daunting that task is, Battlefield studios have pulled it off, delivering a shooter that, despite being $70 at launch, feels like it's worth the price tag because its combat sandbox is so deep, so broad, so rewarding, and so dynamic. You just never stop being surprised by what you're seeing or what you're able to pull off with a bit of ingenuity and a whole lot of luck. So that core is rock solid, but sitting around that are some issues. Maps for one. They're a mixed bag depending on your personal preferences, but one thing that basically everyone agrees on is that there aren't enough big maps, and even the big ones don't feel all that big, relatively speaking. There's also more technical complaints about things like weapon bloom and netcode and gadget tuning and vehicle health, etc. They're small complaints, but important ones, and hopefully EA gets around to addressing them sooner rather than later. Most debilitating, though, has been the glacial slow progression pace. I spent the better part of 50 hours playing Battlefield 6 now. About half of that was during various open and closed betas, and the remainder was during the review and post-launch windows. Despite this massive investment of time, I feel like I've only experienced a small portion of what this game has to offer. Usually that phrase is said in a complimentary sense, but here I use it because I literally can't experience things that I want to experience. The lack of a server browser for the core playlist is brutal, as matchmaking tools make it almost impossible to experience certain maps on my preferred game modes. Vital class upgrades are locked behind frustrating challenges. Weapon mastery unlocks are also painfully slow, forcing you to ride one weapon for dozens and dozens of hours in order to unlock just the essential upgrades. 25 hours spent in the live game now, and I've unlocked one weapon skin. One. You're gonna tell me that's the right way to dial in cosmetic progression? Battlefield 6 is a live service game that intends for you to play it for hundreds of hours, but many people just want to get a good, fun, rewarding 50 or so hours before moving on. And right now, those people aren't getting much in the way of reward. On the point of Battlefield 6 being a live service, this video is not intended to make any long-term predictions about how this game will fare over the longer term. I'll never forget Halo Infinite, which had one of the best betas and launch windows of any multiplayer game ever, only to then quickly run out of steam as 343 proved unprepared to respond to feedback and deliver new content at the required clip. Will Battlefield 6 suffer a similar fate? Hell if I know. All I can say is that the fundamentals that Battlefield Studios have built here are the strongest they've been since Battlefield 1 back in 2016. No one can predict what the future holds, but right now I think it's more than fair to say Battlefield is officially back. I don't typically do it these days, but I do think it's worth talking about the phenomenal technical state of Battlefield 6 because it represents not only a stark contrast to 2042 and most Battlefield games, to be honest, but it's also a high watermark for modern day AAA gaming, where shoddy, half-finished games plagued by technical issues are the norm rather than the exception. Biggest credit has to go to Battlefield 6's servers. Recall that Battlefield 4 basically didn't work for months after it launched, as its server issues were so prolonged and so debilitating. 2042 also suffered from server issues, but they were fixed pretty quickly after launch. With so much interest around Battlefield 6 and really huge player counts during the beta, everyone was pretty sure that EA's servers would buckle under the launch day pressure. EA were feeling confident though, saying that they felt like they had the server capacity dialed in correctly, and you know what? They were 100% correct, because despite there being queues of hundreds of thousands of people long, and despite a peak concurrent player count on just Steam of nearly 750,000 people, the servers held, and in my 50 hours of play, I've had precisely one server disconnect. One! Do you know how insane that is for a brand new AAA multiplayer shooter operating at this scale and with these player counts? That is fucking insane. At a more granular level, there have been complaints about netcode, aka do your bullets register when they hit things. This one is kind of hard to zero in on, given that it's also linked to a conversation around weapon bloom, which we'll talk about later. Personally, I haven't noticed this being a big issue very often. I've definitely noticed some very suspect time to kill, particularly for aircraft, where it seems like you can go from 100 to 0 in an actual split second from just machine gun fire. And similarly, I've dropped pretty fast when I've rounded a corner, or been dropped after I've clearly escaped line of sight. All of these issues do seem to be within the overall tolerance band though, in the sense that you have to expect some of this to occur when you're playing a big server-based multiplayer game with 63 other people running about and buildings collapsing all around you. It's present, but it's not a big deal, and I guess we can only assume that it's going to improve as time goes on. But what about performance? Well, you're not going to believe this, but Battlefield 6 is one of the best running, best optimized AAA releases I've played in a hot minute. Now, obviously, I am playing on top-end PC hardware, but as I've said many times in the past, that very, very often does not help, because bad optimization does not give a shit how many tensor cores you throw at it. On my PC, I can run Battlefield 6 at 4K resolution, maxed out settings, DLSS set to quality, and I'm still regularly getting over 100 frames a second, and yeah, it dips depending on how crazy shit gets, but it never dips so low that it feels like my frame rate is costing me kills. Consoles are a similar good news story. I didn't test them myself, but I'll point you to the Digital Foundry coverage, which demonstrated a locked 60 FPS on the base PS5 and around 80 FPS variable refresh rate on the PS5 Pro. Fantastic image quality, rock solid performance, a rarity in the modern era indeed. Special shout out to the decision to not include any ray tracing here. I love ray tracing, I truly do, but the fact is it imposes a huge toll on your GPU, and it's only beneficial in certain situations and in certain games. Battlefield is not one of those games. It just doesn't need it. Better that performance headroom be put towards destruction or scale or frame rate or whatever. I think EA were really zeroed in on what actually matters when it comes to optimizing a Battlefield game, and I think the sum total of those decisions speak for themselves. But it's not just server stability and technical performance that deserves a round of applause, it's the visuals too. Battlefield 6 is a great looking game that won't stop you in your tracks the same way that some previous Battlefield games did, but its renditions of modern warfare environments and weaponry are fully immersive in their attention to detail. Blood trails will spill out across the pavement as you drag to revive someone, debris will fragment wildly as structures are demolished, exploded landmines will leave man-sized potholes that you can use for cover. The scale of these combat spaces delivers on that feeling of epic spectacle, but the little flourishes make all of this feel so real and reactive. If we're talking technical complaints, the only thing I might point a finger at is the UI, which isn't exactly technical, but it's close enough. In-game UI is pretty good, though it would be nice if we could reconfigure those UI elements a little more. It's the menu experience that is truly awful. It is so confusing and so unintuitive. Why is it this weird carousel view? Why are certain things featured versus not? Like, what does that even mean? There's so many clicks to get through to customization options and only 2 slots for loadouts per class. The options menu has over 600 options, which is good, but all of them seem to have been randomly placed, like some sort of puzzle minigame that EA wants you to play whenever you want to try and change a setting. It's just a real mess, and hopefully EA can tidy it up soon. But you know what? If the biggest complaint I have about the technical state of a newly launched Battlefield game is that I don't like the menus, then Jesus H. Christ, EA really cooked here. It's not about celebrating the fact that the game isn't broken, it's about recognizing the fact that successfully making this type of game is in itself a small miracle. Battlefield games are extraordinarily complex given their player counts, their map destructibility, their server requirements, the audio, how much chaos can occur, and how flexible the engine needs to be to accommodate for all of that. The fact that Battlefield Studios were able to reach a quality bar this high on day one is just a massive, massive achievement. There's so many good things to say about Battlefield 6, but here's the most important one. Feels incredibly good to play this video game. It's a combination of character locomotion, character movement options like crouching, proning, and sliding, weapon swap speed, ADS speed, weapon recall mechanics, and so much more. That's not to say that everything on that list is perfect, because it's not, but it is to say that Battlefield 6 gets enough of it right that it feels great every time that overlay fades and you gain control of your character, or the moment when instinct and muscle memory take over and you dive for cover while switching to a sidearm because your primary is out of bullets and you're locked on a sightline waiting for the enemy to pop out. That shit just feels so damn good. It is first-person shooter black magic, and very few games are able to nail it as well as EA have nailed it here. That really is what keeps me coming back, if I'm being honest, and it kind of mirrors the appeal of one of my other great loves, Destiny. Rest in peace. I played that game for so many years through the good times and the bad times and the very bad times and the holy shit, I can't believe we're still doing this times. But throughout it all, there was one immutable constant: Destiny felt good to play. It just did. And for games that ask you to come back regularly over prolonged periods of time, that feeling can be the difference between choosing to log on versus not. And Battlefield 6 has really got me itching for that feeling whenever I'm not playing. As I mentioned a moment ago, that feeling is comprised of a whole lot of little things, and many of those things are subject to much debate within the Battlefield community. Movement was and still is a really big one. Battlefield 6's movement is faster than it's been in previous Battlefield games, and combined with jumps and slides, movement during the beta was a little out of control, mirroring the frantic superhuman hopping and sliding possible in Call of Duty games. The Battlefield community did not like this at all, and fortunately, EA listened to that feedback and adjusted movement so that it still allows for some outplay, but gunfights don't come down to who's hopping the fastest. Still, this is an ongoing discussion within the community, and certain people would like it to be faster and more frantic. Personally, I don't agree at all. I think movement is exactly where it needs to be, and I'd be bummed if EA were to make any interventions here. The other big community discussion right now is in relation to something called Bloom. This is essentially bullet spread, and it applies some randomness to where your bullets land, and that modifier gets larger as you exceed the weapon's intended engagement distance. It's a conversation that's been bouncing around FPS communities forever. I remember discussing it back in 2016 when I was still covering The Division. Some people think that recoil alone should determine where bullets land, while others say that Bloom gives people some breathing room when they're moving out in the open. Otherwise, burst firing your weapons would allow them to become laser beams even at long ranges. It's a complex discussion with lots of variables, but here's what I think. I think Bloom is generally fine in an arcadey shooter like this, where the focus is on fun over realism, but it does feel like the tuning of Bloom right now can make it very difficult to hit distant targets in a way that feels frustrating, so it could possibly do with some dialing in. Overall though, I think it's broadly fine, and I'd hate to see EA make drastic changes here. The fact that these two topics are dominating the conversation about Battlefield 6's core mechanics is kind of the same as me complaining about the menus in the technical block. They're valid complaints, but they show that EA got 95% of the formula right, and now they're just dealing with the rounding errors. One of the best decisions EA made with Battlefield 6 was to revert to the classic classes they abandoned in 2042. It's an unqualified success here, recentering one of the core tenets of the franchise and, by extension, encouraging squad-based gameplay, since it's hard to be truly efficient on the field without the help of your squad. Having said that, EA has really hamstrung squad-centric gameplay through their terrifyingly awful progression system. So this is the biggest and most consistent point of feedback you'll hear about Battlefield 6, the fact that progression is too slow, but I think it's important to break down exactly what that means because there are different types of progression. Least important, broadly speaking, is cosmetic progression, where you can unlock weapon skins. As I said, after 25 hours of play in the live game, I have, I think, one weapon skin. I might have unlocked a second one while I was writing this script. It's real bad out there, man, as skins are locked behind weapon mastery, and that just involves using a single weapon for a really, really long period of time. It's very lame, to be honest with you, and it's going to freeze more casual players out of cosmetic progression entirely. I think that you could like triple cosmetic progression pace and it would start to feel about right. Having said that, cosmetic progression doesn't impact gameplay, so that's when we start talking about weapon attachments and vehicle mods. Bro, you have no idea how frustrating it is to be using the same weapon over and over again, and you see that some attachment you want is locked behind a weapon mastery level that you just know is going to take like another 15 hours of grinding to reach, and that's just for one weapon, when the same process has to be completed for every weapon in the game if you want to unlock everything. This progression curve really hurts the game because not only does it deny you the dopamine hit of progression, which is an important part of shooters, it just is, but it also forces you to tunnel one specific weapon, rather than experimenting with the vast sandbox available to you. I know EA want to keep you playing and give you a carrot to work towards, but come on guys, like, you've really overstuffed the turkey here, and it's definitely hurting the game. But that's not doing as much damage as this final progression pathway though. Class challenges, man, these are really bad. So Classes all have these gadgets that define them, especially in Battlefield 6, where classes can use whatever weapons they please. Classes are the gadgets they bring into the field. And unless you are seriously no-lifing this game, there's a good chance that you won't have completed any of the class challenges to this point, because their requirements are so numerous and so annoying to complete, and that means you don't have access to kit that makes this game more fun to play, or that deepens squad interactions, or that solves problems relating to the oppressiveness of aircraft or tanks or whatever. I basically main engineer when I play, and I play that role, man. Like, I am blowing up tanks, I am repairing like a motherfucker, I'm just out there doing the engineering thing, and I have still not completed the intro to engineer challenge after 25 plus hours of play. It's crazy. So yeah, the progression stuff isn't as bad as you've been hearing. It's actually worse. You've probably heard it's just about skins or attachments or whatever, but it's not. It's about access to fundamental gameplay elements that make this game better and more fun to play. And on the one hand, this sucks, but on the other hand, it is a testament to the overall quality and appeal of Battlefield 6 that the game manages to survive these issues. Having said that, we cannot tune progression curves for only the most engaged. You have to let more casual players get a look in too. And right now, that's not happening, so I hope EA step in quickly and make some big changes because they're sorely needed. Battlefield 6 delivers some fantastic maps, but also some not great ones, but I'll caveat all of that by saying that it really depends on who you ask. Where people could look at many of the Battlefield 2042 maps and be like, yep, they definitely suck, alright. Battlefield 6's maps are much more about taste and playstyle preference. I, for one, cannot stand this infantry-only Empire State map. Feels like every combat zone has 15 different entry points and 6 different levels, and 50% of the doors are fake. And you can pretty much only play as an assault because engagements are so fast that you barely have time to ADS on an LMG. I hate this map so much. But I have seen some love for it, particularly from people who love the chaos, or who've come over from COD and want a really frantic feeling infantry-only smaller map, and I get it. I don't think it's objectively bad, I just personally hate it. New Sobek City is another one that's love it or hate it, though I have seen a lot more of the latter than the former. Critics will tell you that it's just kind of boring and the elevated center gives way too much opportunity to recons without them having to really work for it. But personally, some of the funnest matches I've had have been on this map because its capture zones reach really different in their layouts, and there's plenty of space for vehicles to move around and do their thing. I do think there are some really standout, fantastic maps here that I'm always excited to jump into whenever they pop. Iberian Offensive has this awesome lane up the side where so much can happen, from infantry charges to vehicle showdowns, and the rest of it provides lots of nice choke points that feel awesome to attack or defend. Siege of Cairo. Man, I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I feel like this is an instant classic, delivering exactly what I'd want from an infantry-focused map, just the right mix of size, layouts, and kill boxes. I also think that Mirak Valley is fantastic, though perhaps that's because it's the largest map at launch, and we kind of need a few more of those. That's the biggest criticism of Battlefield 6's maps. They're just too damn small, even the big ones like Mirak, Op Firestorm, and especially Liberation Peak, which honestly feels too small to be called a big map. I think all that commentary about map size is fair, and EA have already promised more big maps very soon, so I'm not too worried, but yeah, we do need a little more room to stretch our legs, I think. This topic relates to one of the more interesting points about Battlefield 6's design, a suggestion that is prioritizing combat uptime, so you're fighting just as soon as you spawn in, and the action feels more immediate than ever before. I've seen commentary that the game feels overwhelming, like you don't have a moment to breathe, but I just don't agree with that. Other than that fucking Empire State map, I do feel like I have time to plan my ingress, to fall back and find some cover so I can med up and reload. Pacing is undoubtedly faster than previous Battlefield games, but only if you want it to be. As the wise tweet once said, you control the buttons that you press, and I personally have appreciated Battlefield 6's smart and flexible approach to overall combat pacing. If there's one big disappointment I have with Battlefield 6, it's that destruction feels like a byproduct of our actions rather than a gameplay mechanic I can actually interface with. I can punch small holes in Rainbow Six Siege walls to create new sightlines or passageways. I can bring down entire buildings in the finals in order to protect my objective or displace the enemy as they protect theirs. These are both examples of me using destruction creatively and intelligently to create new gameplay opportunities. Battlefield 6 doesn't really work that way, sadly, as destruction isn't granular enough to be used that way, and levels aren't designed in such a way where targeted destruction could open up new opportunities. I understand why this is deprioritized in the way that it is, given that it could cause all sorts of balance issues in a game not really set up for it, but it does feel like destruction is a frontier that Battlefield pioneered years ago, and then it just stopped exploring. Embark Studios picked up where DICE left off, so it would have been nice to see EA put a little more heat on this feature here in Battlefield 6. But even with that shortcoming, the spectacle of Battlefield 6 is unmatched, and I mean that. It is unmatched. No other game can produce the sorts of moments that Battlefield 6 is regularly able to produce. The whole Battlefield moments thing, EA keeps trotting out that line because it remains true. There's simply never a match that goes by where I don't see something that makes me go, holy shit! That is insanely rare in the world of video games, and so while we definitely could use a few bigger maps and the destruction model could be a little deeper, I still think EA have done a fantastic job of delivering a sandbox and play spaces that deliver one epic moment after another. Battlefield 6 is, of course, a live service. I know that's a dirty word, especially around these parts, but I will say again what I've said many times before. It's not that we don't like live services. We just want them to be good. We want the base game to be good and complete. We want to get our money's worth on day one, and then if you want to give us more value after that, then great, more power to you. In my view, Battlefield 6 clears this bar even with its disappointing single-player campaign. I'm already more than happy with what is here, and I don't give a fuck, I'll say it, I'm excited for the future of Battlefield 6. EA have already spelled out a content roadmap that delivers a new map at the end of October, and another one at the end of November, with a bunch of new weapons and new vehicles and a number of limited time game modes. Those maps are free, by the way, so even if you don't shell out for the season pass, you can still play them. You know what else you can play? Portal, Battlefield 6's user-generated content platform. Right now, it sucks because it's basically just XP farm lobbies, but the hope is that after modders get to work, we're going to have some fun, novel game modes to play that could hopefully spawn the next big multiplayer phenomenon. Grow your garden, but in Battlefield? I'm sure someone's working on it as we speak. The other thing we've got to look forward to is Battle Royale, which is coming at some point in the future. That isn't to everyone's taste, of course, but it is pretty popular, and the rumor is that it's going to be free to play. I mean, that could be pretty huge for EA, given how good the underlying mechanics of Battlefield 6 are, and what sort of chaos might be possible when you drop 100 players onto a map powered by the Frostbite engine and force them into a smaller and smaller space. I am very down for that. It's been a while since we could be excited about the future of this franchise, but Battlefield 6 delivers so thoroughly that it's hard to get hung up on the game's shortcomings, however legitimate those complaints might be. Progression is terrible, no arguments there, but it is easy to fix. Maps are a bit too small, but you could just add some bigger ones. Destruction isn't at the cutting edge like it used to be, but it's still cool and immersive and delivers the sort of outrageous spectacle that defines this series. As I've said at the start of this video, you can never predict where these live service games end up because player bases are fickle and developers can and often will make mistakes that upset the momentum of these sorts of games. But there's a clear path forward here for Battlefield 6, owing to how strong this foundation is, owing to EA's stated commitment to it, and owing to the enduring appeal of the Battlefield formula. No game does what Battlefield does, and we've been waiting for this series to get back to doing what it does best for a while now. It's doing it in Battlefield 6, and so I strongly recommend it to you. Thankfully, Battlefield 6 is a very well-optimized game, but if you want to push things to the absolute bleeding edge, maxing out frame rates, resolutions, and settings, then you're going to want to play on a GPU from this video's sponsor, NVIDIA. NVIDIA's lineup of 50 series GPUs has just been restocked and reloaded, so whether you're building an entry-level gaming rig or a fully spec'd out monster, you're going to be able to find the right card for you. No matter which 50 series GPU you pick up, you're going to be able to tap into NVIDIA's game-changing DLSS4 and multi-frame generation technology. DLSS4 is NVIDIA's most advanced super resolution tech. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, but long story short, it's technology that utilizes AI to upscale images, and in so doing, it gives your machine vastly more performance headroom without sacrificing any image quality. If you're looking to play a game like Battlefield 6 at the highest possible resolution and the highest possible frame rate, DLSS4 is going to be the tech that's doing most of the heavy lifting. But you can take that frame rate even higher with multi-frame generation, which again utilizes AI to interlace additional frames in between those being natively rendered, which can massively increase frame rates. Take me for example, running on an RTX 5090, I'm able to push out an average of about 120 FPS running at 4K, ultra settings, DLSS set to quality, but if I turn on multi-frame generation, I am instantly getting nearly 300 FPS. That is a crazy jump, and if I were running a 240Hz monitor, FrameGen would let me sync my frame rate to my refresh rate for maximum smoothness. Battlefield 6 also supports vidia-reflex, which is technology that reduces system latency, making gameplay feel snappy and responsive, and all this comes with the raw power and throughput of NVIDIA's hardware, the undisputed market leaders in GPU tech. Battlefield 6 is the sort of game that deserves an upgrade, so if you've been thinking about one, then now's the perfect time. The restocked and reloaded 50 series lineup is ready to deliver you best-in-class performance no matter which card you choose, so if you want to learn more about the lineup, I've left a link to NVIDIA's product page below. Thanks NVIDIA for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching it.